churches are preaching through that in their gathering. We're going to stay in Genesis, but what we wanted to do is bring Ashley and her team. Ashley works with our Obria ministry, found Marc Newman, heard about him, has heard him speak in his readings and writings, and he's been doing this for a long time, an advocate for life. And he's going to come, he's going to share material, and there'll obviously be some times for some questions at the end. He typically does this in 3 hours, and he's going to do it in about 60 minutes, okay? So it will be a lot, and he'll give some recommendations to you parents that brought kids if there's at a certain point to kind of see the scope of things. But let me read this about Marc, and then we'll welcome him up. Dr. Marc Newman is a demanding communication trainer, incisive pro-life apologist, and president for Speaker for Life, and author of Contenders, a church-wide strategy to unmask abortion, defeat its advocates, empower Christians, and change the world. He has spoken at every major pro-life conference in the country. Former director of speech and debate at the University of California, Irvine. He's retired from teaching in the doctoral program in the School of Communication and the Arts at Regent University. He's the co-founder of Defending Life Summer Institute at Cedarville University in Ohio. He has trained speakers in the public and private sector for over 30 years, so he knows what he's doing. He's also a cultural analyst and appeared on Fox News and Time Magazine. He is from North San Diego County in California, but relocated to beautiful Eastern Tennessee with his wife, Sharon, and their youngest son, Joel. And just a reminder, the reason we're doing this is to continue to be an equipping church, to equip you for whatever next steps and opportunities God has for you. What it also does in a value where we're thinking about healthy homes this year, we want to train specifically to it. So we're connecting it to that value of our church. So if you would, welcome Dr. Marc Newman.
Please excuse the suit. From Southern California, normally I would be in shorts and flip. No, I would not be here in the South, so I thought, well, I should suit up, and then I saw the pastor, and I had other things, but here we are. Oh, yeah. As the pastor told you, I spent most of my life as an academic. I started my career at the University of California at Irvine, ended my career at Regent University. For most of my life, I taught in secular institutions. And when people found out that I was pro-life, it was shocking. An academic, a pro-life academic? No, all right-thinking people, are pro. Oh, we're going to learn how to get rid of that choice word today. But yeah, everybody's in favor of abortion, right, if you're an academic. And so they just figured out, after a while we figured out that Marc, he's a Christian. And you know how those Christians are. All of those Christians, that's the only reason, and you're going to hear people tell you the only reason that you're pro-life is because you're a Christian. That's not true for me. Now, I'm not going to tell you that you shouldn't be pro-life if you're a Christian. If you're a Christian, I think you should be pro-life, but that's not the reason initially that I became pro-life. As a matter of fact, I had never really heard a sermon on abortion my entire life growing up, which is odd because even though I am pushing 65, Roe versus Wade happened while I was still in junior high school. And I became a Christian right about then. And I never heard a sermon about abortion. Why am I pro-life? I'm pro-life because I was a debate coach. And see, once you start becoming aware of the evidence that is out there, it is intellectually inconsistent to be anything but pro-life. Now, I know that a lot of you have been told it's a very, very complicated topic, it's really, really hard to master. I'm going to show you today, this morning, how we're going to manage that. We're going to be talking about abortion. We're going to learn how to make the case for life. Most people, honestly, cannot do it. A lot of folks, even Christian folks who are pro-life, are what I would refer to as checkbox pro-lifers. You know you're supposed to be pro-life, and when something comes along that is pro-life, you're going to kind of do that pro-life thing. But if somebody put a gun to your head and said, make a scientific, moral, and biblical case for life in less than 30 minutes, or less than 3 minutes, right? Most people can't do it. And I will include in that group of people, I hate to say it, some folks that I know that are working in the pro-life field professionally. Because a lot of us lead with our heart, but our opponents are out there attacking people's heads. And we've got to learn how to respond properly. Recently, we've had the Dobbs decision that came down, but from the time of Roe versus Wade until right now, in the United States, we have put over 65 million unborn children to death in this country through abortion. And that's why we must be equipped to make the case for life. Now, the Dobbs decision comes down, and folks, it is not the Emancipation Proclamation for unborn children. It is at best the Missouri Compromise, those of you who remember your Civil War history. What we have now are life states and death states, and some states that are kind of middling in between, and Georgia is one of those states. Right now you have a 6-week ban on abortion, but you have exceptions for rape and incest, and we're going to talk about those kinds of things as we move along today. But I think it's really, really important for people to understand that when we talk about this, abortion is not primarily an issue. Abortion is not primarily an ideology. Abortion is primarily an action. And when people engage in the action of abortion, it leads to casualties. Unborn children die, and then everybody else involved in the abortion is, to one degree or another, scarred. To give you an idea of the kinds of things we are up against, in California, my former home state, Governor Gavin Newsom put together an organization called the California Future of Abortion Council. And in 2021, they put this nice big thick document together asking for about 45 different things from the legislature, and so far I know that at least 25 of the things on this list have been passed. Not satisfied, in 2022 they put out an addendum. I haven't looked to see if they've got the 2023 addendum out. California is the most vanguard-oriented state in the United States. They have $200 million set aside in their budget, $200 million set aside in their budget to increase abortion access, not only inside the state of California, but outside the state of California. They are engaging, their doctors are engaging in telehealth abortions, right? And then referring people to how they can get hold of abortion pills, which is over 50% of all abortions in the United States now are done via a pill. And then they passed a law shielding their doctors from civil and criminal liability. So, for example, if they come to Tennessee where abortion, including abortion pills, is illegal, and they do a telehealth appointment, and then they refer that woman to pills, and she gets the pills and performs the abortion, we can't go after them because California has shielded them. They are bribing their medical students to learn how to become abortionists, trying to forgive their student debt, for example, or giving them scholarships to come and learn to do it. California is at the forefront of the place where doctors will go to learn how to perform abortions in the United States. This will give you just a brief idea of the kinds of things that we're up against. Now, I need to let you know something. As I look around this room, I'm going to tell you that there is no way, statistically, that there are people in this room that do not have abortion in their past. It's simply statistically not possible. You might be a young woman, you have had an abortion. You might be a man who has helped participate in somebody else's abortion. And I cannot get too deep into what we're going to be talking about today without explaining to you that many of the things we're going to talk about may be triggering for you. And some of you have been laboring under the abortion that you participated in many, many years ago. I've had people walk up to me after events like this and confess that I'm the first person they've ever told that they had an abortion 30 years ago, and you are sitting under the weight of that. I am here this morning first and foremost to declare to you freedom. There is not a single sin that any person in this room has ever committed that is beyond the power of the blood of Jesus Christ to forgive. All God requires is confession and repentance, and God will bring you forgiveness and healing and restoration. And if you are dealing still with the guilt of a past decision, you can go to Obria or any of the other pregnancy help organizations here in the greater Atlanta area, and they have things like Forgiven and Set Free and other Bible studies and counseling that you can go through so that you can not only be liberated from the sins of your past, but God will create in you a voice that can go out into your community and help people to either avoid making a similar bad decision or help those people also on their road to healing. So this morning what we're going to do is we're going to learn how to make the case for life by looking at the scientific, moral, and biblical evidence. Then we're going to talk about the risk we all face from abortion ideology. And then finally, we're going to talk about what each and every one of us in this room today can do. Now, a couple of brief notes. You need to understand this is the TikTok version of a 3-hour-long session. So I'm going to have to speak fast. Some of you guys are going, you're going to have to speak fast. Kind of moving along at a pretty good clip right now. But yeah, we're going to move it right along. You were, I believe, emailed an outline for this session, and if you didn't have one in front of you to take notes, it's your own fault. But listen carefully, because this is the important thing you also need to know. After we're done today, you are not going to be a trained pro-life advocate. What you are going to be, though, is you are going to have been exposed to the arguments. You're going to know that they're there, even if you can't call them up quickly. But you will have this outline somewhere on your computer, printed out. I've got books outside called Contenders. It's a book on how to make the case for life for anybody who wants to message. And you can fill this out, and you're going to find out by the time we're done, I am going to deputize you. Also, in the hour I've got, I cannot possibly cover every conceivable argument that you will ever encounter on the abortion issue. But I'm going to be able to cover most of the main ones, and as a result, I think you're going to find you'll be reasonably well equipped. If you pick up the book, you'll be more well equipped. If you bring me back for 3 hours, I'll do the rest of it. All right, so where are we going to begin? I think it's very important when you start talking about issues to define your terms. Now, there's a very important term in the abortion debate, and that word is, of course, abortion. I want to define it for you because a lot of people have weird ideas about what abortion is and what abortion does because our opponents have really muddied the waters a lot. So let me help you out. Anybody in here ever been in the military? Hands up. Thank you for your service, sir. When you went out on deployment and you got halfway to your objective and your CO called you up and said, okay, nope, we're going to scrub that thing, come on back. We say that your mission was what? Aborted. When women have a miscarriage, this is referred to in the medical literature as a spontaneous abortion. All abortion means is a cessation of a process before it reaches its natural conclusion. That's all that word means. But when I use that word this morning, I want you to think elective abortion. Elective abortion. And I'll explain why as we get into this a little deeper. When I use the term elective abortion, the definition that should go through your head is elective abortion is an act of violence that intentionally takes the life of an unborn child. Elective abortion is an act of violence that intentionally kills or takes the life of an innocent human being in the womb. Now, some of you have been told that this whole pro-life issue is so unbelievably complex, there's no way in the world you could possibly master it. I'm going to help you to do it in 3 simple sentences. That's it, just 3. Isn't that easy? And we're going to do it in the form of a syllogism. Do you guys remember syllogisms from philosophy class? Remember that? Some of you guys go, no, I learned that stuff and then I purged it for my next class. All right, I'll help you out. Here's a syllogism. All men are mortal. Socrates is a man. Therefore, Socrates is mortal. Congratulations. That's a syllogism. A syllogism is a kind of an argument where if the argument is formatted validly and the major and minor premise are true, then the conclusion is inescapable. So here is the pro-life case in a nutshell. It is wrong to intentionally kill an innocent human being. Abortion intentionally kills an innocent human being. Therefore, abortion is... That seem very complex to you? Now, the first statement almost everybody will just stipulate, right? It is wrong to intentionally kill an innocent human being. And by the way, if you find somebody who won't agree with you about that, move away slowly. Okay, dangerous people. It's the second statement, right, where you get some pushback. When I would say, no, but abortion intentionally kills an innocent human being. So, what this means now is that I have 2 burdens. My first burden is I have to prove that what's in a woman's body from the moment of conception is a real, live, whole, distinct, separate, living human being. And I have to prove that abortion intentionally kills that human being. Now, if I can do that, then I have filled out our syllogism, right? We all agree that it's wrong to intentionally kill innocent human beings. Now I've proven to you that abortion intentionally kills innocent human beings, and therefore we can only conclude that abortion is wrong. Very good. This is the audience participation part of the morning. All right, let's see if we can do it. We're going to start off, if you want to find out what's going on, if you want to be able to define terms or know what something is, the place to look is science. So the first question we have to ask ourselves is, are the unborn human beings. Well, what abortion clinics say, and what many people just believe, is that what's in a woman's body from the moment of conception is just a blob of tissue. It is an undifferentiated cell mass. It is the uterine contents. It is the products of conception. These are all the kinds of words that people use to talk about what's going on in a woman's body at the moment of conception. Planned Parenthood's own website, in discussing aspiration abortions, never even mentioned the unborn at all. Listen to what they write. The doctor or nurse will use a small handheld suction device or suction machine to gently take the pregnancy tissue out of your uterus. They may also use a small surgical tool called a curette to remove any tissue that is left in your uterus or to check to make sure your uterus is totally empty. But it never mentions, if now it's empty, what it was once full of, other than pregnancy tissue. Let's look and see what science says. Because I got to let you know, when I want to find out what's going on inside a woman's body from the moment of conception, I don't want to talk to journalists. I don't want to talk to people who have financial interest in aborting children. I want to talk to people who study these guys for a living, and those people are called embryologists. So Moore, Persaud, and Torcha, in the latest edition of their long-standing medical textbook, and by the way, this book has gone through multiple editions over the years, and in every single one of them, this line remains the same. The book is called The Developing Human Clinically Oriented Embryology. And this is what they write. Human development begins at fertilization, when a sperm fuses with an oocyte to form a single cell, the zygote. This highly specialized, totipotent cell, capable of giving rise to any cell type, marks the beginning of each of us as a unique individual. When does human life begin? Well, according to embryologists, there. Now, they're not the only ones. There was an essay that appeared in California Medicine, that's the official journal of the California Medical Association, way back in 1970, right, over 50 years ago. And they write in this essay, they talk about the curious avoidance of the scientific fact, which everyone really knows, that human life begins at conception and is continuous, whether intra or extrauterine, until death. I'm sorry, who knows that? Oh, everybody knows that. We want to take it back a little farther. We'll go back over 70 years. This is a little brochure. It's a flip chart, and it is called The Gift of Life. And if you were close enough to it, you would see that these people look like they are going to or coming from church, which of course means that this is a sex education manual. On page 21, they write, if one of the male sperm meets and unites with an egg cell, a new life begins. Right? Isn't that the exact same thing that Moore, Persaud, and Torcha say? Yeah, all the way back in 1951, this little booklet, The Gift of Life, which, by the way, was distributed by the Planned Parenthood Federation of America. This is what Planned Parenthood told everybody back in 1951. So when they tell you that nobody knows when human life begins, I'll have to assume they have amnesia. So have we proven that what's in a woman's body from the moment of conception is a real, live, whole, distinct, separate human being? Yes. Did I cite material from the National Right to Life? No. I cited material from renowned embryologists who write medical textbooks. I cited evidence from California Medicine, the official journal of the California Medical Association. I cited evidence from Planned Parenthood to prove that point. But that's only half my burden, right? The other half is I have to prove that abortion then intentionally kills a human being. Well, abortion clinics, they try to hide that fact. They use all kinds of interesting words. They talk about zygotes and embryos and fetuses. They talk about abortion as just terminating the pregnancy. They talk about how we're going to just evacuate the uterine contents and gently remove pregnancy tissue. But see, experts disagree. For starters, the term zygote, the term embryo, the term fetus, they are just arbitrary labels for stages of human development. Okay, every single one of you used to be a zygote, an embryo, and a fetus in the exact same way that every one of you used to be a newborn and a toddler, right? And a tweener, right? That's a new thing. And a teenager, right? You know, teenagers haven't been around that long. No, people have been 13 for a long time. But the term teenager has not been around that long. It's an arbitrary designation. That's all that is. And by the way, there is no such thing as pregnancy tissue. Anybody here ever struggle with anxiety? That's okay, be brave, raise your hand. I have. Okay. When you went to your doctor, did he offer to gently remove your anxiety tissue? No? You want to know why he didn't? Because anxiety is not a thing, it's a condition. And pregnancy is not a thing, it is a condition. How do I know it's a condition? Folks, all pregnancies terminate usually around 38 weeks, right, with a live birth. So this idea that that's what's being removed is just disingenuous. I do have a brochure here, though, that'll explain it. This is a brochure called Plan Your Children for Health and Happiness. It is a question and answer format brochure about birth control. They ask the question, birth control, is it an abortion? Listen to the answer. Definitely not. An abortion kills the life of a baby after it has begun. It is dangerous to your life and health. It may make you sterile so that when you want a child, you cannot have it. What does abortion do? Abortion kills the life of a baby after it's begun. Wow. Who told us that? Planned Parenthood. This is what Planned Parenthood told everybody in the 1960s. And by the way, some of you guys are looking at this right now as young people, right? You're looking at this going, oh, I don't know, Dr. Newman, that looks a little photoshopped, dude. Right? Yeah, which is why I'm always so glad I own an original. Inside this original, by the way, there's no difference between the language used in this and the language used in this one, except for this one has one extra sentence that says an abortion requires an operation. But both of these say abortion kills the life of a baby after it has begun. By the way, you'll also notice that these have two different covers, which means that this brochure went through multiple printings where they said the same thing over and over and over and over and over again. You might also notice the beautiful African-American child on the cover of this brochure. See, back then, Planned Parenthood wasn't about killing these children. It was just about making sure that as few of these children as possible were ever conceived in the first place. Doctors agree. Remember that little bit from California Medicine I read to you a minute ago? You might think that that was from a pro-life essay, but it was not. Listen to what they write. We'll give you the whole thing in context. Since the old ethic has not been fully displaced, it has been necessary to separate the idea of abortion from the idea of killing, which continues to be socially abhorrent. The result has been the curious avoidance of the scientific fact, which everyone really knows, that human life begins at conception and is continuous, whether intra or extrauterine, until death. The very considerable semantic gymnastics, that's just a fancy word for lies, which are required to rationalize abortion as anything but the taking of a human life, would be ludicrous if they were not often put forth under socially impeccable auspices. What they're saying here is everybody knows when they're pregnant that they're pregnant with a human baby. Everybody knows that abortion intentionally kills that human baby. And so they have this natural intuition. They've got a baby in their womb. And they say, well, we got to overcome that. And in order to do it, we're going to have to engage in considerable semantic gymnastics. We're going to have to lie to people. And even then, nobody would believe it unless we could put out that lie often under socially impeccable auspices. In other words, if we could get the government to tell it to people, if we could get education to tell it to people, if we could get the medical community to say it, if we could get the entertainment community to say it, and it'd be great if we could just get some churches to say it too, then we could overcome that natural intuition. Oh, but they're not done. Next sentence. It is suggested by the authors of this essay, it is suggested that this schizophrenic sort of subterfuge, that's planned lying, is necessary because while a new ethic is being accepted, the old one has not yet been rejected. Now, what was that old ethic back in 1970 that had not yet been rejected? Well, they identify it right in the essay. It's the Judeo-Christian ethic. See, the Judeo-Christian ethic is dangerous because it tells people that every single one of you has individual, objective, moral value. And we can't have that, these doctors say. These doctors say, no, we have to change that and make sure that everybody has relative moral value. And you might be really surprised who they argue should be the people who adjudicate who does and doesn't have value. You might be surprised to find that these doctors think the people who should make that determination are doctors. And abortion choice activists agree. Camille Paglia, Some of you have seen Camille Paglia. She's been on with Jordan Peterson. She's very bright. She just happens to be wrong on this issue. But listen to what she writes very honestly in Salon magazine on September 10th, back in 2008. She writes, "Hence, I have always frankly admitted that abortion is murder, the extermination of the powerless by the powerful. Liberals," she is one, "for the most part, have shrunk from facing the ethical consequences of their embrace of abortion, which results in the annihilation of concrete individuals and not just clumps of insensate tissue." And then in the next sentence she says, "Nevertheless, the federal government's got no business regulating it." I had to reread the paragraph. Regulating what, Camille? Oh, murder. What kind of murder? Murder of the powerless by the powerful. Now, folks, I got to tell you, myself, pastor over here, right, we are people of books, right? You read a lot, don't you, pastor? And so after a while, and I coached debate for almost 20 years, you start to think that everything is an issue or everything's an argument or everything is a political controversy. And I got to let you know that's precisely what the opponents of life want you to think and believe. But I cannot in good conscience allow you to leave here this morning thinking that way. See, I told you earlier that abortion is not primarily a controversy at all, that abortion is primarily an action. And so it's unbelievably important to me that you understand what that action results in. And I'm going to show you something here in just a moment that nobody will show you. How many of you ever watched the Discovery Channel? Ever watch that? You can watch a colonoscopy on the Discovery Channel, right? But you cannot see one of the most common surgical procedures in the United States on the Discovery Channel, and nobody will show it to you. And I'm going to argue you've probably never seen this before in your life. I'm about to show you what the aftermath of a surgical abortion looks like. Now, if you do not want to see this, I want you to put your head down and not look. There's no descriptors or anything else. There's just some music and images. The whole video only takes about 1 minute in length. And so if this is something that's going to be difficult for you, going to trigger you, or if you've got really young kids next to you, have them put their heads down and not look. But once you see this, you will not be able to unsee it. And when you start thinking about this as just an issue, this will remind you that there's so much more at stake than winning a political or a moral argument. Go ahead. I never show that video without watching it. It's the second time I've seen it in 3 days. When people tell you that this is just an issue, I want you to remember that has happened in the United States over 65 million times. And now it's happening as a result of women taking a set of 2 pills, right? Mifepristone, misoprostol, and then women now, the abortion clinic isn't somewhere far away. The abortion clinic, our medical community has turned everybody's home into an abortion clinic, and has turned every desperate pregnant woman in America into a potential abortionist. And they deliver those children, not broken up like that, but whole, into their toilets. And as a result, our sewer systems in the United States are now filled with literally millions of bodies of unborn children. And no one there to counsel the woman, help the woman. That's the America you inhabit right now. So we've established the humanity of every human being from the moment of conception. So we should be done, right? I've proven that what's in a woman's body from the moment of conception is a human being. I've proven that abortion intentionally kills that human being using who for evidence? All my opponents Have you heard me cite anybody from the National Right to Life here? No? Our opponents give us all the evidence we need to recognize that this is true. So what happens, though, is that then people go, well, maybe that first premise really is wrong. Maybe it isn't always wrong to kill human beings if we can demonstrate that there's some kind of difference between some human beings and other human beings. So what we're going to do is we're going to say, well, the human beings that we're killing, it's not like they're really persons or anything like that. Let me explain to you why they do this. The reason they do this is to literally create a class of human beings that it's morally permissible to kill. By the way, this is nothing new. We've been doing this for millennia. We did it in the South during chattel slavery. The Nazis did it over in Germany. And lots of other civilizations have done it over time. So, folks, this is nothing new. This is just our turn at this particular kind of a problem. Whenever we are trying to determine whether or not people should live or die, whenever we're trying to determine who counts as one of us, it's unbelievably important that we have a bright line distinction, that we know with certainty who is and is not included. So, what standards do our opponents use to justify this bizarre shift? This was laid out by a guy named Stephen Schwartz in a book called The Moral Question of Abortion. My friend Scott Klusendorf has popularized this. It's called SLED, which is an acronym. Size, level of development, environment, and degree of dependency. So what our opponents say is things like, well, look, you're so tiny, you don't even look like a person when you're in the womb. Katha Pollitt in her book Prose, she says, you're no bigger than the period at the end of this sentence. And so they say you're not big enough to count as one of us. Or it's your level of development. Well, you don't look like a person. You're not sentient, and you can't communicate. You aren't forming relationships. You can't express a will or desires. You can't walk, talk, smile. You can't do any of those things. So, you're not really a person. And then they'll say that you're in the wrong environment because you're inside of another person's body. And since when you look at a woman walking into the room if she's pregnant, you don't go, oh, there's two persons there. You say there's one person there who's pregnant. Well, that's just one person, so the one in the womb is not a separate person. And then number 4, they'll talk about degree of dependency. And this is the viability argument. And they'll simply say, well, okay, you're inside the woman's body environment, and if we took you outside of the woman's body, you wouldn't be viable. You'd die. Therefore, you can't be a separate person. Well, let's take a look and see if these are good reasons. What about the idea of being too small? Let me explain something to you, folks. No matter how small you've ever been, you do look like a human being. You look like a human being at that stage of human development. Newborns don't look anything at all like 45-year-old men, right? They're much smaller. I don't know how many cells it takes to be counted as one of us. But the bottom line is you do look like a human being back then. The problem is not with your appearance. The problem is with the untutored eyes of the advocates for abortion. So, and bigger is not more valuable. I could have all you guys stand up, and all of you are various sizes and weights. Those of you who are smaller are not less valuable than those of you who are bigger. I actually wrote a Bible study with A.C. Green. Any basketball fans in here? A.C. Green was a Laker. Dude was huge. Not more valuable than me, though, except on a basketball court. In terms of life or death, we had equal value. And by the way, his wife is tiny. She's like 5'2". Just as valuable as A.C. What about level of development? Can I see the hands of every young man in here who's under the age of 25? Raise your hand. I'm not going to pick on you. I just want to see where you are. See, got a few of you back there. All right. Gentlemen, are you here with your dads? Dads, if you're the dad of that kid, raise your hand. Okay. Young men, Jared over here, he's much more fully developed than you are at present. And I'm going to tell you why. The two hemispheres of your brain haven't zipped together yet. They won't do that till you're about 25, which is why they won't rent a car to you until you turn 25. Now, I know I'm not still in Texas. I was just in Texas a couple of days ago. But you guys all know what I mean when I talk about a hold my beer moment. What happens after a guy says hold my beer normally? You can say it, something stupid, right? And that's because your brain hemispheres haven't zipped together yet. So you're not fully developed. 8-year-old girls are not less valuable than their 18-year-old sisters just because they have less developed reproductive systems. We don't determine whether or not somebody has value based upon differing levels of skill or differing levels of accomplishment. And what about your environment? Folks, when I walked down the aisle here and up to this platform, I walked orders of magnitude farther than any of you traveled down your mother's birth canal. There is nothing magical about a 7-inch trip that suddenly sprinkles fairy dust on you and confers upon you personhood. As a matter of fact, it does make things kind of weird. You've seen this, maybe some of you have seen the pictures of intrauterine surgery. They open the woman up, and there's this beautiful picture of this baby's hand coming out and grasping the surgeon's finger. So what are you going to say? Not a person. Person. Then they stuff them back in. Not a person. Right? It's a very bad argument. And then number 4, the idea of degree of dependency. Folks, many people are dependent. Everybody in this room, you are one slip on some black ice away from being dependent for the rest of your life. My mother-in-law had Alzheimer's. She came and lived with us for the last 2 years of her life. She needed everything from us, right? She could not turn herself over. She could not get herself a drink. She couldn't feed herself. She couldn't clean herself. She couldn't do anything. And we had her in our house for the last 2 years. At no point in time did she ever cease being my mother-in-law, Jenny Sosby. She was always a person. I find it intriguing that it would have been illegal, right, for me to put her to death. But she needed everything that unborn children need. She needed a safe place to live. She needed nutrition, hydration, and waste removal services. We provided all those things for her. She could not do that for herself. It did not make her not a human being, not a person. So let me help you out, folks. In that big circle of everything that comprises persons, everyone who's a human being fits inside of that circle. Now, just for fun, you do know, right, that not all persons are human beings. Somebody name for me a person who's not a human being. Pastor? God. God is a person. Angels are persons who are not human beings. But all human beings, every single one of you, is a person. Every single time that there's ever been a division between human beings who are persons and human beings who are not, it has been determined, Christopher Kaiser says in his book, The Ethics of Abortion, every single time it's been determined that a moral catastrophe has taken place. Like I said, this is our turn. This is what you need to know. There is no morally significant distinction between the embryo you used to be and the human being you are now that would have justified killing you then, but not now. That is what is true. Now, we should really be done, right? I mean, we've proven that what's in a human body from the moment of conception is a human being. We also demonstrate there's no distinction between human beings and human persons. So if it's wrong to intentionally kill an innocent human being, and abortion now clearly intentionally kills a human being, well, then abortion must be wrong. Well, interestingly, our opponents now jettison that whole argument. And they step away and they say, okay, well, what about? And they start doing the whatabouts. And the first whatabout they do is, what about hard cases like rape and incest? This is a book by Robin Marty called Handbook for a Post-Roe America. It is written by a gal who's a full-blown pro-abortion activist. Listen to what she says that they want to do with rape and incest claims. And by the way, Georgia has rape and incest exceptions. Pressuring your legislators to ensure that at minimum, victims of sexual assault will still have access to abortion care and aren't forced to carry to term just because of the state they live in is not just a reasonable action that reflects a majority's belief on abortion, it also offers a clear, incremental step toward repealing abortion bans as a whole down the road. It's a political tool. They don't care about rape and incest victims. They only see them as pawns to achieve greater public policy goals. So let's have a look at that. What are the standards people use for why you shouldn't have rape and incest, or why there should be rape and incest exceptions? Number one, it's because you shouldn't have to carry a rapist child because the woman was forced. Number two, because that child, if that child were to be born, would be a constant reminder of the assault. Right? Those are the two major reasons that I hear for why we need to have rape and incest exceptions. So let's go ahead and respond to that. The first time you hear anybody say, well, what about rape and incest? The first words out of your mouth can never be an argument. It can only be compassion, because you don't know if the person you're talking to has been a victim of rape or incest. So what you say to them is, I got to tell you something. If you've ever been a victim of rape or incest, I'm so unbelievably sorry for you. And I'm going to tell you, I believe that people who, if people commit that violent act or commit that horrible transgression, if they are caught, if they are tried, if they are convicted, they need to be punished to the fullest extent of the law. But the circumstances of someone's conception doesn't change their nature. It doesn't change what they are. So let me help you out here. We're going to count people. So a man violently rapes a woman, and as a result of that crime, a child is conceived. How many human beings are in this scenario now? 3. Okay. Now let's assign guilt and innocence. The violent rapist, guilty or innocent? Okay. The woman, guilty or innocent? What do you mean? Of course he's innocent. Okay, now what about that third person? The child, guilty or innocent? Okay, now let's decide what we're going to do to these people. To the violent rapist, what should be done to him? I always have somebody, usually in the South, but usually Texas, kill him, right? Every single time. But a little heads up, since the late 1970s, the Supreme Court says you can't kill rapists. It is cruel and unusual punishment. So no matter if the guy's a serial violent rapist, he can't be put to death. But let's justice, right? Let's punish them to the fullest extent of the law. What should we do to the woman? Not to the woman, right? For the woman, right? By the way, nobody ever gets over this, but they can get through it. What do they need? They need spiritual, emotional, and physical support. And we're going to provide all that we can to that woman, right? To help her find her way through it. Now, remember, but there's a third person right in the mix. We have this child over here. What should be done to this child? Now, isn't it interesting that of the three people we're talking about in this scenario, there's only one that's actually at risk for capital punishment. And it's one of the innocent ones. And now I will tell you, I've run this scenario on secular college campuses, and I've looked at young women directly in the eye and I say, does that seem fair to you? And generally speaking, people go, gosh, when you put it that way, no. So now I'm not telling you that that woman has got to parent that child, but you might be interested to know that of the women who conceive as a result of sexual assault, the majority of them choose to give birth to their children. And of those that choose to give birth to their children, the majority of them choose to parent that child. Because, see, you've got to get it out of our heads. It's not the rapist's child. It's her child. That child's also her child. And, folks, I'm not a big fan of the idea that your parentage determines what you're going to be. I think if you're raised up in a loving home, you got a really good shot turning out pretty well, especially if you come to know Jesus. So, once the humanity of the unborn child is established, we cannot punish one innocent human being for the crimes of another human being. And then our opponents go, well, okay, but what about exceptions due to the impact of pregnancy? And some common exception arguments, and I've only got time to address three, and that's going to be pushing it. One of them is threat to the life of the mother, right? If she's pregnant, some pregnancies are dangerous, ectopic pregnancies, for example. The second one is my body, my choice. And today I'm only going to have time to handle the bumper sticker version of this argument. There's a much deeper version of this argument I'm not going to have time to get into today, but I'll reference it so you'll know what I'm talking about if you ever come across it. And number three, the threat to the mother's physical health. For example, some women have a thing called placenta previa. This is where the placenta grows over the cervix, and if you push a baby out, you can cause you serious problems. There's placenta accida, where the placenta grows too deeply into the uterine wall. Some women have gestational diabetes. Some women have hypertension when they're pregnant. All of these are significant health threats. So let's respond to these arguments. The threat to the mother's life. Are women at risk post-Roe? Despite all of the Facebook memes that you have seen, oh no, in a Dobbs world, women are going to die from ectopic pregnancy. Women are going to have septic uterus because nobody will take their miscarried child out of their womb. You hear people on Facebook making these ludicrous claims that that's what's going to happen. Folks, number one, let's talk about ectopic pregnancy because that's the big one. Ectopic pregnancy is when a child is growing but not inside a woman's uterus. And in the vast majority of cases, like 99% of the time, that child's growing inside of a fallopian tube. When that happens, this is a life-threatening pregnancy complication, and there's no way that that baby is going to survive. If the baby's allowed to continue to grow, it very well could kill the mother. So the gold standard for treatment is they come in and, one standard some people use is methotrexate, but the gold standard is they clamp the fallopian tube and then they clip it and take the baby out. In this case, the death of the unborn child is foreseen, but it is not intended. As a matter of fact, the majority of women who have ectopic pregnancy, if they possibly could, if the medical technology was there, they would remove that child and implant it in their own uterus, but we can't, at current time, we can't do that. So remember when we said abortion is an act of violence that intentionally kills an innocent human being? There's nothing about ectopic pregnancy treatment that's intentional. So the key here is we're focusing on promoting life, not on ending it. And by the way, ask anybody, okay, you think that this is a problem in the Dobbs world, so let me ask you a question. Can you name for me a single doctor anywhere in the United States that has ever been successfully prosecuted for treating an ectopic pregnancy? Oh, but the physicians are afraid. only the abortion physicians, or only the pro-abortion physicians, because they're using this, folks, as a tool to get the nose of the camel under the tent, just like Rob and Marty talked about, to open this thing up so that there will be abortion on demand, which, by the way, is the official position of ACOG, the American College of Obstetrics and Gynecologists. They want abortion on demand. You want to know why? It's big business. What about my body, my choice? Unfortunately, I only have time to handle the bumper sticker side of this. Folks, here's the deal. I think we've demonstrated it's not just the woman's body. It's somebody else's body. And let me demonstrate this for you. Ladies, how many of you have had children? Hands up. How many of you had a difficult pregnancy where you threw up a lot? Hands up. Okay, now what if I told you that out in my car I've got a drug, and it's an awesome drug, and if you take it, you'll never have morning sickness again? Would you like that? Some of the younger girls are going, yes, I would like that. It's not a myth. This drug actually exists, but no physician will give it to you. Mean physicians. Why won't they give that drug to you? Well, that drug is called thalidomide. And when women took it, it did, in fact, suppress their morning sickness. The problem is it had horrible birth defect results on unborn children. It created birth defects. So that's why you can't have it. But wait a minute, isn't it your body, your choice? No. The physicians know it's also that other person's body. When they do surgery inside the womb, it's 2 patients, not 1. And by the way, in case you're wondering, are you really able to do whatever you want with your own body? I will suggest to you that walking out in the street smoking crack cocaine will disabuse you of that notion rather quickly. Right? You're not allowed to do whatever you want with your own body. There is a more sophisticated version of this argument, which is known as Judith Jarvis Thompson's violinist. If you pick up my book, you can read about it. I just want to let you know, if anybody ever says to you, you shouldn't have to use your body to support somebody else's body, I will give you the response. I'm not going to give you all the details, but I'll give you the response. In this case, we're not talking about just some stranger here. We're talking about your own children. And yes, you are required to support your own children. Also, this idea that you can just unplug yourself from somebody else, that sounds very antiseptic. Abortion doesn't do that. It violently ends the life of that child. It overstates the hardship. When you get pregnant, my wife worked all the way up until a week before she was supposed to have our first son. She ended up being off of work 3 weeks early, or 4 weeks early, because he was 3 weeks late. I actually walked up to my wife's abdomen at about 21 days in, and I said, if you don't come out, we're coming in after you. And by the way, that night, my wife's water broke, so if you think I'm persuasive, hey. But it overstates the hardship. You aren't just going to lay around for 9 months. Yes, there are some women who have difficult pregnancies, and they may have to rest a little longer for a longer period of time, but by and large, most women work throughout their pregnancy. And finally, the idea of shedding the burden by simply having an abortion or unplugging yourself from the person you don't want to support. Folks, in abortion, it's not shedding a burden, it's trading a burden. You trade the burden of live childbirth with the burden of knowing that you have conspired together with at least 2 other people to end another human being's life. And for many people, that particular burden never goes away. Now, all the other reasons people give for why you should be able to have abortion, things like economic reasons and things like that, all I'm going to tell you can do is say, look, if I've demonstrated there's no significant moral distinction between the unborn person you used to be and the person you are now, then I can trot out any person. So if you're telling me you got economic problems, imagine a woman, she's got 3 kids, youngest one's 2, lost her job, going up to the doctor saying, can you put this one to death because I really can't afford this one. Right? Nobody would do that, right? Why? Because that 2-year-old is a human being. And all human beings are persons. So if I can't do it to the 2-year-old, I shouldn't be able to do it to the unborn child. And this applies across the board. So the final shift is what I call unmasking abortion extremists. Once you lay out all these arguments, people finally just throw up their hands and go, yep, we just want abortion. Dr. Colleen McNicholas, the chief medical officer of Planned Parenthood in St. Louis, in a Senate committee hearing on Tuesday, July 12th, 2022, she called on the Biden administration to declare a national health emergency in response to the Dobbs decision. Oh my gosh, pregnancy is suddenly a national health crisis. She argued, this defies any rational analysis, she said that being against abortion is anti-life. Yeah, me too. She finished. Abortion is normal. Abortion is an act of love, and it is fundamentally health care. Folks, this is only possible if you believe that unborn children are tumors or parasites and that pregnancy is some kind of disease rather than what it is, which is the natural biological result of two people having sexual relations. And by the way, it's been that way since human beings came into existence. So, we understand the scientific case for life. We understand the moral case for life. Let's take a look briefly at the biblical case for life. I'm not going to read these scripture passages. I'm just going to cite them. You all have Bibles. You can look them up. But I will tell you what they are. But I think it's important for you to understand that the Alan Guttmacher stats on abortion demonstrate that people who seek abortions are 24% Catholic, 17% mainline Protestant, 13% evangelical Protestant. Add those numbers together, 54% of all people seeking abortions claim to be in the church. I've been telling pastors for decades, if we want to shut Planned Parenthood down, all we have to do is keep our people out of there. Lifeway research in 2015 said that 4 in 10 women, more than 4 in 10 women who've had an abortion were churchgoers when they ended that pregnancy. Only 7% discussed it with anybody at church. Just over half say no one at the church knows it. Nearly half of the women who've had an abortion, 49%, say the pastor's teaching on forgiveness doesn't apply to terminated pregnancies. And we wonder why our people are so horribly burdened. They just don't believe. Folks, I got to tell you something. For many men and women in America, and I really want to include men, a lot of times we forget men in this. Do you know, many men have many more abortions in their past than women do. A guy can go out and on a weekend impregnate 3 women, get abortions for all 3 of them. So this is a burden shared by many men, and we forget that. Imagine what it would be like to come to church week after week after week and believe that when the pastor gets up and talks about forgiveness, it doesn't apply to you. We have to help those people find their way to liberation and help other people to avoid this. I did a research survey of 1,000 university students. It was about public speaking and freedom of speech and whether or not a professor could tell you what you could and could not say in your classroom. And so, we talked about these kind of things, and buried in it, because professors were telling people, you can't, I don't let my students speak about abortion. And I said, well, why not? Well, because, it's overdone and people have already made up their minds, stuff like that. So I thought if they know everything about it and have already made up their mind, they should be able to pass a quiz. So I asked them some questions about abortion, and you may not be surprised to find they failed abysmally. But buried in that questionnaire was the question, if a woman came to you with an untimely pregnancy, to what local organization would you refer her? It was an open-ended question. It wasn't fill in the blank. You had to come up with the answer out of your head. At the state universities where I did this, every single one of them had a pregnancy help organization nearby. At the state universities where I did this, the number 1 answer at 57% was Planned Parenthood. They wrote Planned Parenthood. The number 2 answer at 39% was I don't know. And less than 4% mentioned their pregnancy help organization. Then I repeated this survey at a large evangelical Christian university with 7 fully licensed pro-life medical facilities all around it. Number 1 answer at 53% was I don't know. Number 2 answer, though, at 42% was Planned Parenthood. Then we asked them a question. If you mentioned an organization, can you tell me where it's located? 80% of the students who wrote Planned Parenthood knew generally where it was located, some so specifically it gave us the cross streets and the building it was behind. 6.5% mentioned their pregnancy center. You add that together, it's more than 100%. The reason why is some students actually wrote, if she wants to keep her baby, we send her to the pregnancy center, and if she doesn't, we send her to Planned Parenthood. Christian evangelical students. Do you know the vast majority of students in America, Christian evangelical students, the vast majority have never, ever heard what you've just heard today? Ever. My friend Scott Klusendorf teaches at Summit and asks that question, and the number of students who raise their hand is abysmally small. So let me give you really briefly the biblical case for life. God's intentions toward human beings are that human beings are created in God's image. That's what we learn in Genesis 1:27. That God forms us in the womb. He knows us in the womb. That's in Psalm 139, verses 13 through 16. We are commanded by God, by the way, most popular command in all of Scripture, Genesis 1:22, to be fruitful and do what? Multiply. By the way, a command which has never been rescinded. And that children are both a gift and a reward is what Psalm 127:3 tells us. But God does condemn the killing of the innocent. I hope I don't have to unpack the 10 Commandments for you, right? But the first one that applies to human beings is we're not supposed to kill each other. We're not supposed to kill innocent human beings. And the killing of children, in particular, is an abomination associated with idol worship. Jeremiah 32, verse 35. They built the high places of Baal that are in the valley of Ben Hinnom to cause their sons and daughters to pass through the fire to Molech, which I had not commanded them, nor had it entered my mind that they should do this abomination to cause Judah to sin. See, back in the Old Testament, what happened? They had the tabernacle at first, then they had the temple. And, if you were having problems, like your crops were failing and stuff like that, you could have gone and inquired of God at the temple or the tabernacle, but maybe you had sin in your life or something. God was really intriguing about how he would inform some of the priests about what was going on in people's lives. So you didn't want to go there because maybe you wanted a second opinion. So you went down into the valley of Ben Hinnom. You went up on the high place, right? And there you met with a priest of Baal, or of Molech. And so the priest of Molech would say, hey, we'd be happy to solve your problem. You got fertility issues with your field? Not a problem. Just come on back and this time bring your kid. And so they would come back and they would bring their child. Now, Molech was a large bronze statue, an idol, with a hole cut out in the belly and a blazing fire. You can imagine that metal was very, very hot. It was very important that the sacrifice be made willingly. And so in order to drown out the screams of the children and keep back the tears of the woman, they would have guys out there beating drums very loudly as the children were sacrificed. They were rolled into the belly of this idol and they were incinerated. There are places in Carthage called Tophets where they have these little rolled up scrolls. You can still find them today. They'll unroll them and they'll say, we hope that our sacrifice was acceptable to the God. That was Molech worship back then. What does it look like today? Well, the gal's got a problem. She finds out she's got an unintended pregnancy. Maybe she's getting a lot of pressure from her boyfriend. Maybe she's got a scholarship and she's going to lose it because she can't run hurdles, 7 months pregnant. And so she could come to the pastor at any of there must be hundreds and hundreds of churches around here. But she kind of knows what the pastor is going to tell her, and so she seeks out a second opinion. So she goes to the First Church of, Planned Parenthood. She walks in, she sits down with a counselor. The counselor says, the great God, Planned Parenthood, can solve your problem. All you have to do is go walk down the hallway here and get on the table, or take these 2 little pills, and then you'll magically be unpregnant, and we'll solve all your problems. Now, you'll notice she doesn't have to be told to go back and bring the child, because we have enculturated our young people to just bring the child with them. And then once that child comes out, you saw the photographs. In a surgical abortion, they spread out the child's parts on a light board to make sure they got it all. And then what happens to most of those children is they go into a medical incinerator. Sound familiar? Folks, I'm not suggesting to you that abortion is like Molech worship. I'm suggesting to you that abortion is Molech worship. C.S. Lewis, in his book, The Screwtape Letters, said he's got a demon talking to a senior demon talking to a junior demon. He says, the orders from the high command are at present to conceal ourselves. And that's all we're doing here. We're engaging in the exact same behaviors that they engaged in before, for the exact same reasons, by the way, to keep the life we currently have, or to keep our dreams alive of the life we would like to have. And the destroyer says, I'll give that to you if you will take the life of your unborn child. I'll swap it. And by the way, it's a devil's bargain. It very rarely ever works out the way people think it's going to. And by the way, for those of you, and I'm going to tell you right now, if it doesn't happen to any of you in here, it will happen to some of your friends. They will have an unintended pregnancy. It's what happens when people have sex. By the way, the child's not sinful, right? How you got that child might be. You can confess and repent of that. The child, though, is fine. He's a gift from the Lord and a reward. That's what the Scripture says. I don't have one of those weird annotated Bibles that say, children, those conceived under appropriate circumstances. My Bible doesn't say that. They're a gift from the Lord and a reward. What I'm telling you is, yes, now your dreams may be different, but I've got studies that show that women who got turned away from an abortion and then didn't keep pushing to seek one, but went back and had their children, virtually every single one of them can't imagine their life without their child. So I want to encourage you, have children. By the way, blood guilt, which is what we're talking about here, extends to both the perpetrator, it also extends to passive bystanders. Proverbs 24:11 and 12. Deliver those who are being taken away to death and those who are staggering to slaughter. Oh, hold them back. If you say, see, we did not know this, does he not consider it who weighs the hearts? And does he not know it who keeps the soul? And will he not render to man according to his work? So God says it's not just the ones committing the act that have blood guilt. It's people who know and don't do anything to stop it. They also have blood guilt. And then finally, folks, abortion is not loving our neighbor. The Bible commands us, first and foremost, to love our neighbors as ourselves. And abortion is not that. We know the scientific case for life, the moral case for life, and the biblical case for life. Now let me explain to you briefly why this matters to you. Even if you didn't find these, I'm hoping all of you found all these arguments very persuasive, but even if you didn't, I will just let you know that you are a self-loathing individual if you want to support abortion ideology, because it's coming for you. There is a danger associated with an arbitrary definition of who counts as a valuable human life. As soon as we say we can define away certain groups of people, there's no reason at all why you can't someday become one of those groups of people. I want you to listen to what Gary M. Atkinson writes in his essay, The Morality of Abortion. This was published in the International Philosophical Quarterly way back in 1974. He's an old dude. I finally tracked him down and met him this last summer, and we had lunch together. He's a brilliant guy. Listen to what he writes. It is believed that the line can be drawn at birth, but the line is arbitrary, and it will be recognized as such by future generations precisely because it will be in their self-interest to do so and to justify infanticide and euthanasia. Those who desire infanticide and euthanasia have been given all the justification they need by the arguments supporting abortion. The only thing that remains to be done is to tear down the tissue of rationalizations that, for the present, act as a barrier between abortion and euthanasia. Acceptance is first gained for abortion by emphasizing irrelevant or even imaginary distinctions between the fetus and the newborn child, right? They're too small, right? They're in the wrong environment. Imaginary distinctions, right? Because all of us change our environment. All of us are bigger and smaller. Imaginary. For example, one speaks of fetal tissue or developing human tissue or the products of pregnancy, while refusing to allow as linguistically proper any reference to the fetus as a child. But remember, Planned Parenthood said, right, abortion kills the life of what? A baby. That's what they used to say. They don't let you say that anymore. Not allowed to say that because we're creating that distinction. Then, he writes, having justified killing the fetus, one proceeds to emphasize the similarities between the fetus and the infant so as to justify killing the born child and finally the adult. He wrote this in 1974. It is the world you are currently inhabiting. This guy, he looked at every single argument that justifies abortion on demand, and he concluded that if those justify abortion on demand, they are equally valid in justifying infanticide and involuntary euthanasia. He concludes this essay by saying the rational person will reject abortion in self-defense. Now, you wonder if it's going to happen? It is happening. Folks, over in Canada, we have medical assistance in dying programs. People who are not terminal at all are being asked for and are getting euthanasia. By the way, that's going to be extended next year to minors, as long as they can get a judicial bypass saying that they are sufficiently mature. What do you suppose are the odds any of those are going to get denied? Then later it's going to be extended just to people with mental health issues. Now, it used to be when somebody was suffering from, for example, depression, that you got them help. But see, getting them help's expensive. But a euthanasia pill, very inexpensive. And when the state governs the cost of all health care, they're going to go toward the less expensive route. Folks, it's coming for us. Abortion shows it can absolutely happen here. Some people say, well, that there's not in the United States. Folks, if you believe that, you have a frightening lack of understanding of human history. I want you to think back to Germany. Now, some of you are old enough to remember watching Hogan's Heroes. How many Hogan's Heroes watchers? Okay, quite a few of you, okay? And you start to believe that, right, that all Germans were nincompoops and idiots. But they weren't. They had the best continental universities. They were unbelievably literate. They had incredible philosophers, very, very smart people. What happened, though? They got to believe that there were certain kinds of human beings that were inconvenient to have around, in fact, dangerous to us. And so what they did was they built killing centers far away, built railroads and shipped them over there, and then put them to death over there in ovens. Killed 6 million Jews and 6 million other quote-unquote defective people. Folks, compared to the Nazis, the U.S., we've made the Nazis look like pikers. We put to death over 65 million people. We didn't have to build killing centers far away. As a matter of fact, we've made people so comfortable with them, we can drop them right in the middle of residential neighborhoods. And then we've convinced our people to bring their own kids in and pay to have them put to death, and then to get our government to pay to have other people's kids put to death. That'll give you an idea of kind of where we really are today. Folks, evil comes in many guises, but it always comes bearing the same principles. If you're waiting for Nazis to come goose-stepping down Main Street, you're going to wait a long time. But it always bears the same principles. Find the weakest and most defenseless image bearer of God, dehumanize them, and then you can do whatever you want with them. You can abuse them, you can engage in medical experimentation on them, and put them to death if you want to. This is where we are. And Canada shows us what is coming if the church will not stand up and say, no, I got news for you. This is going to end, right? It's either going to end when Jesus comes back, because I'm going to tell you right now, there's no way in the world he's going to countenance that. But wouldn't it be great if he could come back and find that we had already done the work that he would have done? So what can you do? There are two things that authentic pro-life people do. Number one, they speak up. Number two, they rescue. By speak up, what I mean is some of you, you're going to need to continue to study. I'm going to guess most of you don't think that you're going to walk out of here and be able to repeat everything I said in the last hour. You're going to have to study a little bit. You guys remember studying back from school? You read stuff and got it in your head? And by the way, the best way to get it in your head and keep it in your head is to teach it. So you all have blank outlines. So you can pick up a video copy of this, or you can go pick up Contenders and get the material that you need, or my good friend Scott Klusendorf's got the second edition of his book, The Case for Life. You can pick up that book. You can fill out this outline, and you can teach this in your life groups, Sunday school classes. You can go on college campuses and teach this. I can only be here a little bit. I got 50 states to cover. But you can be the voice of the unborn here in your own community. But you might have to study a little bit and then teach what you've learned. Also, use your voice to advocate. This could be, on the radio, on social media. You can write letters to the editor, editorials. Whatever you can, keep the issue out in front of people. I always tell pastors, hey, pastor, if your divorce rate was 1 out of every 3 marriages, and the way that the divorce took place was the husband or the wife killed each other, how often would we be preaching about divorce in our churches? Pretty often, I would imagine. 1 out of every 3 to 1 out of every 4 pregnancies end in abortion. And so, yeah, I do think we have to talk about it a little more frequently. We have to go out and also sponsor debates if you're on a college campus or a high school campus. Campaign and vote. I'm not going to tell you who to vote for, folks, but I'm going to tell you this. If people are advocating the death of innocent, unborn, vulnerable children, I don't think they're worthy of your vote. People say, you're a one-issue voter. Folks, everybody's a one-issue voter. Just depends on what your one issue is. Be a church liaison. Obria has got an organization here that does pregnancy help, and you can be a liaison between the church and them. With your small group and everybody else, you can find out what's going on over there. You can help pray and make things happen. And then finally, rescue. What's the number one way that we rescue? Prayer. Prayer. Every time you pray, you stand before the God who spoke the universe into existence. The God with a cattle on 1,000 hills. You pray for the lives of your unborn neighbors, and then begin things like, I don't know if you, Pastor Jared, maybe you can tell me. Most churches don't. Do you have an Embrace Grace program here? Okay. There's Embrace Grace, and there's also an organization called Love Life, or a similar program. These are people who are a bridge between pregnancy centers and the church. I'm going to tell you a terrible story. I've only got a couple of minutes, so I'll make it really fast. I had a director come up to me, a pregnancy center director come in to me right as I was getting ready to go in and train a bunch of pastors. And she said a pastor, not one of the ones in the training session, she was talking to him and said, hey, a 15-year-old girl came in and she was pregnant and we led her to Jesus, which happens a lot at pregnancy centers. I know pregnancy centers that have 100, 170, 240 people a year come to know Jesus at their center. They have an advantage. People walk in, are stressed. They're looking for freedom. They provide it, but they are not equipped to disciple these people to maturity. So she walked up to the pastor and said, hey, my girl's, she's looking for a place to land. And he looked at that woman dead in the eye and said, you know, we just don't think a 15-year-old girl is a good fit at our church. A 15-year-old pregnant girl. Now that guy needs another job. Okay? Here's the deal. How many of you would like to see the people at your church become more gracious and merciful? Okay. If you want people to become more gracious and merciful, you got to put objects of grace and mercy in front of them. Now, nobody wants to be an object of grace and mercy, right? My mother-in-law did not want to be an object of grace and mercy, I guarantee you. But helping out my mother-in-law for 2 years, she still died of Alzheimer's. Didn't change her. Sure did change me. Sure did change my wife and my sister-in-law and my niece and my son, who were her caregivers. You want to become more gracious and merciful, you involve yourself in the lives of people who need grace and mercy. And then finally, volunteer for and donate to Obria Medical Clinics. That's your pregnancy help organization right here. In your notes that were sent to you, we got the address. It's at 565 Old Norcross Road, 200 in Lawrenceville, Georgia. And it's just obria.org. Just look for the one in Lawrenceville. By the way, little heads up, I have never been arrested in my life, ever. If I ever get arrested, I'm going to tell you right now, it's going to be an unplanned arrest. Get it? Okay. But I know who my bail bondsman is. It's King Stallman. You want to know why? Because his jingle kept popping up on the radio all the time. It's better to know me and not need me than to need me and not know me. Folks, it is better for every single one of you in here to know Obria and never need them than for you to need or know someone who needs Obria and not know them. So if you do anything after today, I want you to pull out your phone, I want you to open it up to Obria, and I want you to bookmark that page, or if they've got an app on there, I want you to put that app on there. And you may never need it, but if you do, it's good to know that it's there. So folks, today we've looked at the scientific, moral, and biblical case for life, how abortion ideology puts all of us at risk, and what we can do about it. If we don't do it, who will do it? Do you think the federal government's going to teach your people about the sanctity of human life? Do you? No. Do you think that the medical community, I'm talking about the professional medical community, do you think that they're going to do that? No, because ACOG's already said they're not on our side. Do you think that the entertainment community is going to do it? Right, TikTok and the folks in Hollywood, they think, no? No? What about public education? Think they're going to, no? So folks, if the church will not do it, I'll make you say this out loud. If the church will not do it, who will do it? That's your commission. Take the message of life out. If we can create a community of life right here at Shadowbrook, and we start engaging objects of grace and mercy with grace and mercy, people come to know Jesus, people go out into the world and become productive citizens, demonstrating that having an untimely pregnancy is not a life sentence. Although I guess there's a way in which you could say that it is, in a good sort of way. When we make that community here, that community will bleed out into the wider community. It'll bleed out into Atlanta. It will bleed out all the way throughout Georgia. And as I've told people over and over again, this is not a state-by-state battle anymore, folks. It's a regional battle and will eventually become a national battle again. But Jesus tells us that we're supposed to let our good works shine in such a way that people will see them and then give glory to our Father in heaven. And I think that that needs to start with how we treat the weakest and most vulnerable among us. I'm going to pray, and then I'll take any questions until the pastor kicks me out. Father in heaven, thank you so much for an opportunity to talk today with these great people here at Shadowbrook. Thank you for Pastor Jared for being willing to bring me in. There's so few churches anymore, it seems like, that are willing to do it. I thank you, Father, for the people who sat through this. I pray that everything that was said today that is true pierces our heart and motivates us to act. And if anything today was said that was not true, I pray that it blows away like the chaff on the wind. Father, I ask for you to embolden us to act in grace and mercy toward those who need it so much. And Father, that we will not forget our unborn neighbors. Help us, Father, to stand in the gap, to speak up and to rescue, so that they too can enjoy the wonderful life that you, the author of life, bestows on each of us. We ask for these things in the name of your precious Son, Jesus. Amen. Okay, if you guys want to play Stump the Pro-Lifer, now's your chance. Questions? Oh, by the way, how many of you have ever been told by your professor that there's no such thing as a stupid question? It's not true. Okay.
Now they're not going to ask questions.
No. See, a stupid question is a question that you have that you don't ask. And the reason why it's stupid is it never gets an answer. Okay, questions? Be bold, somebody. Yes?
So at the beginning you talked about the problem with the abortion pills, that they're becoming
Yes.
so available. A lot of the pro-life legislation seems to have kind of a protection for the criminalization of women.
Yeah.
What is the pro-life strategy to kind of close that loophole?
What you're getting at is real difficult, and I do address it in the 3-hour thing that I do. So I'll try to make this as brief as I can. Right now, legislatively, I believe that all states should be like my state in Tennessee, where abortion is just illegal. Even if abortion is completely illegal, California is going to still send your people abortion pills. And then they've shielded their people against it. Now, eventually, I got to let you know, I think we're going to win California. I think we'll flip them. Why? Because we have all the scientific and moral evidence on our side. But even if we do, there are still nations around the world that will continue to be willing to ship abortion pills in here. So ultimately, this battle, while the legislation is important, because legislation is, or like laws, are a tutor to people to tell them what's moral and what's not, which, by the way, when you think about it, it's kind of bizarre, because that would mean, if that were universally true, that at one point in time, human slavery was moral, and it's not. So the law is not always right. So for the last 50 years on abortion, the law has been horribly, horribly wrong. But we must first win the hearts of the people in our churches, and then we have to win the hearts of the people out in the community, because there is, I hate to say this, but it's true, there is no way currently that I know of to stop the importation of abortion pills. If you go on Etsy and you type in abortion pill earrings, you'll see people who've made those. California is currently stockpiling abortion pills. Robin Marty is encouraging people to, even if they're not pregnant and don't intend to ever get pregnant, to stockpile 20, 30, 50 doses of abortion pills. And so the final answer on this, see, this isn't like slavery where you can look at somebody and go, oh, there's a person over there and they can walk and talk and I can put them on an underground railroad and take them to freedom. This isn't like that. This battle is going to have to be won in the hearts and minds of people. And it may be that we're going to find ourselves like we were in first century Christendom. You guys know, right, that the Romans used to take their children, and if they didn't like them, or if they were defective, they would leave them out on a junk heap and to die from exposure. Christians would come over and snatch those kids up and take them home and raise them as their own. By the way, do you want to know how long it took that kind of act to happen over and over and over and over and over again before they finally changed the law in Rome? It took 300 years. But they did it. See, God tells us never grow weary in doing well, right? In following the command, never grow weary. So there really isn't, the thing that you're describing, that's what makes this particular battle so complex, is that now we have two little drugs. And by the way, there's a Supreme Court case coming down about the first of those two drugs, mifepristone, and if we win it, it won't change a thing. Because misoprostol, which is the induction drug, they're already demonstrating it's very effective, because what it does is it just causes you to miscarry an undeveloped baby, and then that child's just going to die. So this battle ultimately has got to be won in people's hearts. I talk a lot about things because people say, oh, you pro-life people, you just want to punish women who have abortions. And I give scenarios in my book about 3 different ways that people can engage in intentional killing and have 3 completely different legal outcomes. So I don't know what the legal outcome ultimately will be, but right now we got people swimming in 50 years of philosophy being pumped at them from the educational system and from our government, who's paid for it all this time, telling them it's just a blob of tissue. We've got a lot of educational groundwork to do before we get to enhancing punishment phases, is what I would say.
I'm so sorry.
Okay.
I got to do that. I got to be that guy. What I would encourage you to do is he'll be around after service. His book's out there that has larger versions. Thank you for coming today. I think he's right when he says this starts as an individual and in the home and in their education for the next generation to not think the way they have for the last 50 years. That was a lot of words, and well done in 65 minutes, 70 minutes. We're going to give a little break because we got guests coming in to shift our mindset. Even for me, I'm like, how do I step into the gathering today? Because we're about the good news.
The power of the Holy Spirit.
And what he said. So we get to come back in and submit ourselves to God and read, sing, preach, pray, and see the Bible today. And that good news is going to fuel us through all the endeavors. So Dr. Marc, thank you. If you'll give him a round of applause. He'll be available afterwards. We may get started a little late, but if you need to take a break or move your seat or take your kid to get checked in, that'd be great. We'll gather here in just a little bit.